going to talk about Spring Boot here. So Spring Boot is okay. It's a building. So you can see that we have a definition here. Takes an opinionated view of building production-ready Spring application, right? So you can make a Spring application which is ready to deploy. Okay. Now, what are the prerequisites for this session? So if you are not matching with the prerequisite, then please understand, try to understand the concepts, because if you don't know some basic stuff, it will be very difficult for you to understand this. Now, what are the prerequisites for this session? First of all, you should know basic Java. It will be better if you know Servlet and JSP, a bit of it, not exactly everything, but what exactly Servlet means. Another thing is how to use Eclipse. That is something you should know before going for this session, before going ahead of the session. If nothing is matching with you, you can just close the session, that's fine. Should we know XML config as well? Yes, that will be better if you know XML, right? So the topic for today is Spring Boot. Okay, so how the session will be going. So first of all, we'll talk about Servlet and JSP. So we'll make a simple simple code where we can simply add two numbers. That's it, nothing else. So we'll add two numbers. So we'll go for addition of two numbers, and then so that will be done. That will be done using Servlet and JSP. And then once we have talked about Servlet and JSP, which will, of course, my screen is flickering a lot. I don't know what is going wrong here. Okay, it's not flickering now. Okay. Yeah, so we'll be going for Servlet and JSP first, and then we'll move towards Spring Boot. So we'll see how exactly this can be done in Spring Boot. So let's start the thing. So first of all, I will open my Eclipse, and let's add two numbers using Servlet and JSP. Yeah, I can see that Spring is flickering. I don't know what is going wrong here. Just try to adjust now. So we'll click on next, and then we'll go for, so we'll create a new project here, and we'll say this new project is, we'll go to others, and we'll select Spring, not Spring, but we'll select a web project. Not web project. Oh, I guess I'm not in a proper, I'm in Java EE. Yes, we are. Let's create a new project here. We'll say new dynamic web project. And when you say dynamic web project, we'll say this is a demo servlet application. In fact, I already have that project there. We'll simply say demo project. And what I'm going to do now is I want to add two numbers, right? So first of all, we need a HTML page, right? So we'll create an HTML page here. We'll say this page is index.html, and then we'll say, yeah. So screen is flickering when I type something. I don't know if will it work now. Okay, so I think it will not flicker now. So when I say form, oh, it's flickering. I guess whenever the color is changing, the screen is getting flickered. Okay, so we got a form tag here, and when I say form, I will say action, and I will say add. Add. So I will simply say add, and then here what I will do is I will say type. So don't worry, the session is getting recorded, and the video will be uploaded on YouTube as well. So we'll say input type equal to text, and we'll say input type equal to text, and we'll say name equal to t1. So we'll simply add two numbers. Again, this is a simple code for addition of two numbers. So our main idea is not to go for a big code, but just to understand what's the use of Spring Boot. And then we'll require a button here. We'll say input type equal to submit. Okay. Now when I click on the submit button, what I want to do is I want to call this add, but to handling add, we don't have anything, right? So we'll say demo new, and we'll say so we create a servlet here because we want to handle the request, right? We need something using which we can add two numbers, and then so we'll say com.telusko, that's my package name, and we'll say the class name is add servlet. Now since we want to add two numbers, and now people who, if you don't know servlet, that's fine, because we are not here to understand servlets. We are here to understand what's the use of Spring Boot. Okay, so we have a servlet here, and whenever I send a request for add, so whenever I send a request for add, it will call this particular servlet, which is your add servlet, right? And here what we'll do is, so we have to fetch those two values. Now when you say you want to fetch those two values, you have to explicitly mention integer dot pass int. Yes guys, the screen is flickering. I don't know what's going wrong there. Might be some issue from the network side. In fact, when I was trying to connect to the session, it was taking lots of time. So we'll say request.get parameter. To fetch the value, we'll say t1, and then we'll say copy and paste. Now since what we are doing here is we are fetching those two values. Now if you don't know servlets, please try to understand. We are fetching the values. If you know servlet, you know what I'm doing, right? So what I'm doing is whatever value we are passing here in t1 and t2, that goes into this add servlet, right? And then we can simply add those two values. We'll say int k equal to I plus j. Now once you got the value of k, I can simply print the value. Now how do you print the value? We'll say out.println. You can print the value, which is k, and you're done. Once you do this, but yeah, we have one more issue. We have to first create object of out, and that's one of the issue with servlet. You have to create all the object by yourself. You always expect that your Java will give you something, but unfortunately you have to do everything by yourself. So you have to create object of print writer here, so that you can say out.println. Okay. Now if you run this code, it will work. What you will be getting is your addition of two numbers. Let's try that. We are simply doing addition of two numbers here. Okay, so let me just show you the output. Yeah, the screen flickering is irritating, right? Okay. What I'm thinking, we should stop this session and we can reconnect. I don't know. Is it flickering now? Okay. Is it something you can adjust, guys? The flickering part? Okay, so what I will do is I will say 8 plus 7. If I click on the submit query, you can see we got the answer is 5. So what we are doing here is we are adding. No, it's not because of this recording, because I have done this a lot of time. Okay, so you can see, so we are adding those two values and we got the output. So what's important is we got the output, right? But then just to add those two values, we have to think about lots of stuff, right? Example, if you don't do this configuration here, what we do in servlet is you have to. So you have to do in the web.xml file. So if you know what I'm talking about, we have to write the web.xml file here, and that's so it's a lots of work, right? So you have to do all this thing when you work with servlet. You have to fetch this value by yourself. You have to create object of print writer by yourself, and then you have to print, and then you have to map this by yourself. But then the moment you go to Spring Framework, okay, in fact we have done one more thing here. I have to add this Tomcat this Tomcat thing by myself. So when you install Eclipse, you have to add Tomcat to your Eclipse, and that is something which is very important. If you don't do this, it will not work. But then Spring Boot says, hey, don't worry, I have something interesting for you. If you want to do the same thing using Spring Boot, what you have to do is you have to create a new project. But then I'm not using Eclipse here. You can see that I'm going for a different type of IDE here called as Spring Tool Suite. So Spring Tool Suite is a different IDE compared to Eclipse, but it is based on Eclipse. This is a flavored type of Eclipse. It's a different Eclipse altogether. Okay. So what I will do here is I will create a new project, but this time I will go for a Spring Starter project. Okay, and I will mention this is a Spring Boot project, and then I will click on next. I will click on web, Now since we are creating a website, you just have to take a web here so that you will get all the features, then click on next and click on finish. It is so easy to create a Spring Boot project. So it will take some time to get this downloaded from the internet. Okay, I don't know why it is flickering so much. Okay, so I got my project here, and then I will open this. And then, so first of all, we need that HTML file, right? So I will say right click and we'll create HTML file here. We'll say HTML file. Now again, I will not type everything by myself. I will simply use my old code. If I click on finish, you can see we got HTML, but I don't want to type everything by myself. What I will do is I will go here and I will copy this code because that's what we already have, right? So we'll paste that stuff here. So we've already got a HTML page. Whenever I call for add, now if you want to create a servlet, so you can see when you go for server technology, you have to create a class, and that class extends HTTP servlet, and then you have to create a doGet method which takes two objects, request and response object, and then you have to convert the value coming from the user, that is T1 and T2. So what we can do in Spring Boot is we can create a simple class. Instead of creating any servlet, you can create a simple class, and we can name this class add controller. And again, you can have any name, that's fine with us. Now to make this a controller which can work with the request, you just have to use an annotation as add controller. Now this annotations is very important when it comes to Spring framework. And that's where I feel your core Java concepts should be very clear before going for the advanced part. Now what we can do here is we can create any normal method. We can say public string hello, a simple method, and then we can simply return whatever you want to return. So what we want to return here is the addition of two numbers, right? But then whenever I call for this add, it should call this method, right? But then how it will call this method? So for that, I guess this font is bit small. Let me just increase the font size here. Okay, so what I will do is when I want to say for all the for the add request, so I will say request mapping because I have to map the request, right? For add request, whenever the user calls for the add request, I want to execute this method hello, and then this hello will take two parameters. So whatever value you are getting from the user, you will be getting those parameters here. Now what are those parameters? Okay. First of all, let me just check if it is visible for you on YouTube. And guys, if you like this type of sessions, do click on the like button just to let me know that if you are liking this type of sessions. Okay, I can see your messages and everyone's saying it is flickering a lot. Okay. Yeah, so I want to accept those two values, right? So to accept those two values, we can actually use one more annotation here called as request param. In fact, let's not do that. What if I've simply say instead of in servlet, what we did is in servlet we were fetching those two values and we were converting those values into T1. I mean, we were converting those values into integer, right? But then in your servlet, in your Spring framework, in Spring Boot, you can simply say int I comma int j. Okay, and then we can simply return I plus j. That's it. Again, we have to convert into string. What I will do is I will say I will convert that into string. That's the logic we can use. But then whatever value you pass here in T1 and T2, how those value will be assigned here? That's the real confusion. How can you assign T1 and T2 here? Is it possible directly? Yes, you can do that. So to achieve that, we can simply use one more annotation called as request param, and you will say the value for t1 should go to int I. Let's import the package for that, and value for t2 should go to, so value of t2 should go to j, and that's it. You don't have to do any conversion, you don't have to specify anything. Now just compare these two logics. So compare these two logics. This is your servlet, and look at the code, how irritating it is. And look at your control, look at your Spring Boot MVC. First of all, I've just changed this to REST controller. Okay, look at this code, which is much simpler to, if you look at it. This one or that one. In fact, I feel this one is better. In fact, there is one more advantage here. The advantage is, if I run this code, and you can see in Spring Boot, I have not used any Tomcat server. Nowhere I have used a Tomcat server, right? If I go to the browser, if I search for localhost 8083, that's the port number for Spring Boot, and you can see we got hello world. That's weird. We don't want hello world. What we want is add. Oh, I want to call this page, which is new file.html. We'll say new file.html. Oh, it's not able to find the file there. That's weird. What I will simply do is I will simply call the add instead of wasting more time. Let's see if this works. Oh, even this is not working. That's weird. Why so? Why it's not working? Oh. Let's run this once again. We'll say, where's the project? I guess the project is not getting refreshed. We'll right click and we'll say run as Spring Boot application, because when you run this, you have to run it as Spring Boot application, and you can see it is working, and it's working. And let's check the port number on which port it is running. It is 8080 port number, not 8083. Let's do that once again, and let's call our new file.html. Oh, it's not working again. What's wrong here? Let me just check the error, guys. Does it had done any mapping here? So it is doing the mapping there. Let's try with add. Is it calling add? Yes, it is calling add. Let's pass the value. We'll say t1 equal to 5 and t2 equal to 8. Can you see that? We got the output. Again, I'm not able to call the index.html page. That's fine. But you can see we get the output. We are getting the output in Spring Boot. So learning Spring Boot is actually very easy. It makes your work very easy. But if you have noticed, we have done one more thing. When you compare with your Eclipse example, we have to add the Tomcat, right? But the moment you do Spring Boot project, you don't have to add Tomcat, because Tomcat, which can run your servlets, is embedded in your Spring Boot. And you can see if I open the pom.xml file, for that you should know what is Navin to understand pom.xml file. Again, my intention here is not to teach you how exactly Spring Boot works. My main idea here is to explain, just to show you that there is something called a Spring Boot which exists in Java frameworks. In future, if you want to learn something, this is something which you have to learn. So you can see, when you create a Spring Boot project, you get an embedded Tomcat. You don't have to create your own Tomcat, you get your Tomcat embedded, because we are using a Spring Boot starter project. Make sense? So that's the power of Spring Boot. In fact, this is not just the only power. If you want to create a database application, you can use Spring Boot. If you want to create an amazing website, you can use Spring Boot. That's the way we are doing here. And it will reduce lots of codes. It will reduce lots of errors. Because see, when you work with Eclipse, trust me, when you try to write a server application for the first time, there will be lots of issues. Maybe this errors, maybe Tomcat issue, right? And you have to configure lots of stuff. But then Spring Boot says Spring Boot is not the Spring Boot doesn't focus more on configuration, it focuses more on the working of it. So in Spring Boot, we focus more on the working and less on the configuration. And of course, right, we are Java developers. We want more of logic, right? Instead of focusing on the configuration. So if you don't like configuration, Spring Boot is for you. So I would recommend you to explore more on Spring Boot. There are lots of tutorials available on YouTube, available on Google. Just you can explore them there. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you in the live session. Nothing else. By the way, it's 12 a.m. here, so we are talking from one day. So it's been. So that's it. That's it from this session. If you liked this session, do share this session on your Facebook profile. Okay, so we have some questions here. We got the question from Narendra. What's the difference between Spring MVC and Spring Boot? So basically, we use Spring MVC to make websites, right? But then Spring Boot is used to make your project much easier to work with. You can use Spring Boot for Spring MVC. You can use Spring Boot for JPA. You can use Spring Boot everywhere. Okay. So Spring Boot is actually a way of making a project. So that's it from this session. Do like and share on your Facebook profile if you liked this video. That's it. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you're enjoying my sessions. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining.